In the dimly lit corner of Thornton's Bistro, a wounded veteran was about to face a moment that would test his quiet dignity. What started as a routine Tuesday dinner took a shocking turn when he came face to face with deliberate exploitation. Marcus Rivera wasn't your typical restaurant customer. For over a decade, he had spent his life defusing roadside bombs in Afghanistan's deadliest provinces, known for his unshakable composure under fire. When he encountered an inflated bill that tripled his meal cost, he had no idea he was walking into a defining moment of community character. Rivera's silent acceptance of the overcharge would lead to consequences that would reshape everything. What began as one man's quiet humiliation would become a thunderous demonstration of military brotherhood. The coastal town of Millfield would never be the same after his former Navy SEAL unit arrived with briefcases full of cash and an unforgettable lesson in honor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The bell above Thornton's Bistro's door chimed with the same tired note it had produced for 30 years, though tonight it seemed to carry less warmth than Marcus Rivera remembered from childhood visits with his grandfather. He paused in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust, a habit from clearing rooms in Afghanistan where hesitation meant death. The restaurant showed its decline in ways that went beyond normal wear. Paint peeled from window frames, several light fixtures flickered intermittently, and red vinyl booths bore duct tape patches over tiers. The carpet felt sticky despite recent mopping. This wasn't the warm, bustling family restaurant his grandfather had brought him to every Tuesday when he was 8. Marcus chose his usual corner table, positioned to observe the dining room with his back to the wall. Old habits. The prosthetic beneath his jeans required a specific angle as he settled, a maneuver perfected to appear natural despite constant awareness of the artificial limb's limitations. From behind the bar, Danny Thornton watched with barely concealed irritation. Marcus had been coming here every Tuesday for 6 months, same modest meal, paying without complaint, generous tips despite obviously limited means. Tonight, Danny's patience had reached its breaking point. Unpaid invoices stacked his desk. The bank had called twice about overdue loan payments. His ex-wife's lawyer sent threatening letters about child support. And here sat this veteran, this constant reminder of Danny's failures, quietly reading a worn paperback. "Maya," Danny called to the young server, refilling water glasses. "Table 7 needs service." Maya Santos looked up, tucking dark hair behind her ear. At 22, she carried quiet confidence, learned from life, requiring both resilience and grace. Her father's army uniform hung in her childhood closet, a reminder of service and sacrifice that informed her worldview in ways classmates couldn't understand. She approached Marcus's table with genuine warmth. "Evening, Mr. Rivera." "The usual." "Tonight?" Marcus nodded, closing his book. "Thank you, Maya. How are classes?" "Finals next week," she replied, voice carrying exhaustion and determination. "One more semester for my associate's degree." "Your father would be proud," Marcus said quietly, referencing the framed photo she'd shown him once, her father in dress blues outside some forward operating base. Maya's smile faltered at mention of her father, killed by roadside bombing when she was 16. She recovered quickly, nodding thanks before heading to place his order. Danny intercepted her at the pass-through. "Add premium charges to table." "7's order," he said, voice low but sharp. "Sir, the burger. Make it Angus special. Fries, loaded version. Add the soup course he didn't order." Danny's eyes remained fixed on Marcus, who sat reading, unaware of the conversation. Maya stared at her boss, understanding dawning with sick realization. "Mr. Thornton, he ordered regular burger and fries." "That's what I'm telling you to." Charge him for premium options. He can afford it. The words hung between them like a challenge. Maya glanced toward Marcus, noting worn jeans, the careful way he made coffee last through meals, the library book with cracked spine from multiple readings. I don't think that's... You don't think what, Maya? Danny's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby diners. You don't think I know how to run my restaurant? Maya felt her cheeks flush. She needed this job. Final semester tuition was due in 2 weeks. Her savings held exactly 127.43. But looking at Marcus, who always treated her with respect, asked about classes, left tips sometimes equaling his meal cost, something inside rebelled against this injustice. He's a veteran, she said quietly. So? Danny's response was flat, dismissive. That doesn't entitle him to special treatment. Ring up the order like I told you. Maya stood frozen, caught between financial necessity and moral conviction. She watched Marcus turn a page, movements calm and measured, unaware his simple dinner was about to become something else entirely. From across the room, Frank Morrison watched with growing unease. At 68, Frank read situations with instincts, from surviving Vietnam and subsequent civilian decades that proved in some ways more challenging than combat. He'd noticed Danny's behavior toward Marcus, subtle slights, reluctant service barely contained hostility. Frank had frequented Thornton's for 15 years, back when Danny's father ran it with warmth and genuine hospitality. The elder Thornton, a Korean war veteran, understood service and sacrifice. His son possessed neither character nor business acumen. 20 minutes later, Maya returned with Marcus's meal, same burger and fries he always ordered, now carrying a price tag that would turn her stomach when presenting the check. Marcus ate slowly, methodically. He'd learned meals weren't guaranteed, that savoring food was both luxury and necessity. The burger was decent, fries crispy enough. Nothing fancy, but honest fare reminding him of better times. When Maya approached, with the check, Frank set down his coffee and watched carefully. Something in her posture, reluctant movements, avoided eye contact, signaled brewing trouble. Marcus accepted the check with usual quiet grace, glancing at the total with mild interest. Frank saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly as he registered the amount, $47. $85 for a meal costing less than $16. For a moment, Frank thought Marcus might protest. The younger veteran's eyes moved from check to Maya's face, processing not just the obvious overcharge, but discomfort written in her expression. Instead, Marcus reached for his worn leather wallet and counted exact change. He added a $5 tip, his usual amount, and placed the money on the table with quiet dignity that characterized every interaction Frank had witnessed. "Thank you, Maya," Marcus said simply, voice carrying no anger or confrontation. "Have a good evening." Maya's eyes glistened as she collected payment, hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Rivera, It's fine," Marcus interrupted gently, voice weighted with understanding. "You have a good rest of your shift." As Marcus rose, adjusting for the prosthetic leg, Frank noticed Maya's hand moving toward her phone. Her fingers were steady now, jaw set with newfound determination. She lifted the device, framing the scene as Marcus walked toward the exit with measured stride that had carried him through countless Afghanistan patrols. Behind the bar, Danny watched with satisfaction, unaware his petty triumph was being recorded. Frank followed Marcus into the parking lot, evening air carrying salt tang from nearby ocean, distant waves providing rhythmic backdrop. "Son," Frank called out, voice carrying authority of age and shared experience. Marcus turned, expression polite but guarded. "Evening, Mr. Morrison." "That wasn't right. What happened in there? You know that, don't you?" Marcus's smile was tired but genuine. "It's just a meal, Frank. Nothing worth making a fuss about." "That was deliberate, and we both know it. You don't have to take that treatment from anyone." "I've taken worse," Marcus said simply, finding his car keys. "And I'm still here, Frank studied the younger man's face, seeing quiet strength that had gotten him through difficult post-Vietnam years. But he also saw dangerous resignation beyond stoicism. "Your grandfather would have raised hell about this," Frank said, playing his strongest card. "Old Miguel Rivera didn't take crap from anyone." Marcus's expression softened at mention of his grandfather, but resolve remained firm. "My grandfather also taught me to pick my battles, Frank. This isn't worth fighting." Inside, Maya stared at her phone screen, watching the captured video. The image was clear. Marcus Rivera, wounded, veteran, paying triple price without complaint, while Danny Thornton looked on with smug satisfaction. The injustice burned in her chest. She thought about her father, about stories he'd told before deployment, about caring for fellow soldiers. She thought about Marcus, who never asked for special treatment but always showed dignity and respect. She thought about Danny's petty cruelty. Finally finding its target, the 47-second video captured more than a transaction. It revealed everyone's character. Marcus's quiet dignity, Danny's vindictiveness, her own moral awakening. As she watched Marcus drive away into the night, his dignity intact, but injustice preserved forever on digital media, Maya made a decision that would change everything. Her finger hovered over the share button. Then she thought about her father again, about the uniform in her childhood closet, about standing up for what was right, even when it cost something. The video uploaded at 11:47 p.m. with a caption soon, "To be read by thousands. This is how we treat our heroes. This veteran paid triple for his meal without complaint. Where is our honor?" Maya's finger trembled slightly as she pressed share, the blue light from her phone screen illuminating her face in the darkness of her cramped studio apartment. The video uploaded with a soft chime that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. She set the device aside and stared at the water-stained ceiling, her mind replaying the evening's events like a film reel she couldn't stop. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face, that moment of quiet recognition, when he'd looked at the inflated bill, understanding exactly what was happening, but choosing dignity over confrontation. She saw Danny's smug satisfaction, the way he'd watched from behind the bar like a predator savoring a kill. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed, a comment notification, then another. By 3:30, the notifications were coming too fast to count. Miles away, in his small apartment above Morrison's hardware store, Marcus Rivera followed his morning routine with military precision. Coffee first, black, strong enough to wake the dead. Physical therapy exercises came next, the stretches and movements designed to keep his remaining legs strong and his prosthetic functioning properly. The pain was always there, a constant companion since that roadside bomb outside Kandahar. But he'd learned to work through it. He pulled on his work clothes, khaki pants and a polo shirt with the hardware store logo, and grabbed his keys. Tuesday mornings meant inventory at the store, a task that required focus and attention to detail. Frank Morrison had given him the job 6 months ago, no questions asked, just a handshake and a starting date. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and Marcus valued honesty above almost everything else. His phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. Marcus had never been one for social media, preferring the tangible world of nuts and bolts, of problems that could be solved with the right tool and steady hands. At 6:15 a.m., 3 time zones away in his Arlington cybersecurity office, Tyler. Ghost Washington was already 2 hours into his workday. The former Navy SEAL kept irregular hours, monitoring network security for a defense contractor while simultaneously running his personal project, tracking veteran-related content across social media platforms. Tyler had developed sophisticated algorithms to flag videos, posts, and comments involving military personnel, particularly those showing veterans in distress or facing discrimination. It was volunteer work, born from his own struggles, transitioning to civilian life and fueled by the alarming statistics he encountered daily. 22 veteran suicides per day, homelessness rates, unemployment numbers that painted a picture of a society failing those who had served. The algorithm flagged Maya's video at 6:23 a.m. Tyler almost dismissed it, another generic "support our troops" post, until he clicked play and saw the face in the frame. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, leaning closer to his monitor. The face was older, marked by lines that hadn't been there in Afghanistan, but Tyler would recognize Marcus Rivera anywhere. They'd served together for 3 deployments, had shared foxholes and near-death experiences, had carried each other through missions that classified documents would never fully capture. Tyler took a screenshot of Marcus's face and immediately opened his secure communication app. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he composed a message to Commander Sarah Chen, currently stationed at Naval Base San Diego. "Phoenix, you need to see this. Rivera, civilian incident. Uploading video. Now." The response came within minutes. "Confirm identity. Stand by." Tyler spent the next hour tracking the video's spread across platforms. The view count climbed steadily, 5,000, then 15,000, then 30,000. Comments poured in, ranging from outrage to support to the inevitable trolling that accompanied any viral content. But the overwhelming sentiment was clear. People were angry about what they'd witnessed. At Morrison's Hardware, Marcus was arranging pipe fittings when Mrs. Patterson approached the counter. She was a regular customer, a widow in her 70s who treated the hardware store like a social club, always ready with local gossip and unsolicited advice. "Marcus, dear," she said, her voice carrying unusual urgency, "have you seen this video that's going around?" Marcus looked up from his work, confusion evident in his expression. "What video, Mrs. Patterson?" She fumbled with her smartphone, fingers uncertain on the touchscreen. "My granddaughter sent it to me this morning. She said it's all over Facebook and that Twitter thing. Well, it's you, dear." The blood drained from Marcus's face as he watched himself on the small screen, sitting in Thornton's Bistro, accepting that inflated bill with quiet resignation. The video quality was good enough to see every detail. His worn clothing, the careful way he counted out exact change, the tip he left despite the obvious overcharge. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "Why would someone... That server girl, Maya Santos, she posted it with some message about how we treat our heroes." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were bright with tears. "Marcus, honey, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell that man what he was doing was wrong?" Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the sensation that always preceded his worst moments with PTSD. The hardware store suddenly felt too small, too bright, too full of concerned stares and whispered conversations he couldn't quite hear. "I need some air," he managed, stepping out from behind the counter. In the back office of Thornton's Bistro, Danny Thornton stared at his phone screen with growing horror. The video had been shared hundreds of times overnight, and the comments were brutal. Someone had identified the restaurant, posting its address and phone number. His business's Facebook page was flooded with 1-star reviews, each more scathing than the last. "Disgusting treatment of a veteran. Will never eat here again. This owner should be ashamed. How do you sleep at night?" Danny's hands shook as he tried to delete the comments, but they appeared faster than he could remove them. His phone rang constantly. Reporters, he assumed, though he'd stopped answering after the 3rd call. The front door chimed, and Danny looked up to see his mother, Elena Thornton, entering with the determined stride of a woman on a mission. At 72, Elena still carried herself with the dignity that had made her the unofficial matriarch of Millfield's business community for decades. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had kept him in line as a child and still made him feel small at 45. "We need to talk." "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you deliberately overcharged a wounded veteran. Explain how you've turned your father's restaurant into a place of shame." Elena's voice remained controlled, but Danny could see the fury burning in her eyes. She pulled out her own phone, the video already queued up. 23,000 views, Daniel. 23,000 people have watched you humiliate a man who served his country, a man who lost his leg fighting for your freedom to run this business into the ground. Danny slumped in his chair, the weight of his actions finally settling. On his shoulders, "The business is failing, Mom. The bills, the loans, I don't know what else to do." "So you decided to take it out on someone who couldn't fight back? Someone whose only crime was trusting that you'd treat him with basic human decency?" Before Danny could respond, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, her expression growing even more serious. "That was Frank Morrison," she said quietly. "He says there are 3 black SUVs parked outside his hardware store and men in military bearing watching the building. He thinks they might be looking for Marcus." Danny's face went pale. "What does that mean?" Eleanor looked at her son with a mixture of disappointment and fear. "I think it means, Daniel, that you're about to discover what happens when you dishonor a man who has brothers willing to stand up for him." Outside Morrison's hardware, Tyler Washington sat in the passenger seat of a rented SUV, his laptop balanced on his knees, as he coordinated with the rest of their team. Commander Chen's flight from San Diego had landed 30 minutes ago. Jake Rodriguez was driving up from Los Angeles. They were converging on Millfield with the precision of a military operation, because that's exactly what this had become. "Target acquired," Tyler spoke quietly into his headset. "Rivera is inside the hardware store, appears distressed but mobile." Chen's voice crackled through the comm. "Maintain overwatch. No direct contact until I arrive. We do this right." Tyler watched through binoculars as Marcus emerged from the hardware store, Frank Morrison beside him. The older veteran's protective posture was clear, even from a distance. A fellow warrior, recognizing another in distress. "Phoenix, Rivera is moving. Morrison is with him. They're talking in the parking lot." "Copy that, Ghost. Time to show this community what brotherhood really means." Commander Sarah Phoenix Chen received Tyler's encrypted message at 0715 hours during her morning briefing at Naval Base San Diego. The notification appeared on her secure tablet as she reviewed patrol schedules for the Coronado training facility, but the sender's code name made her pause mid-sentence. Ghost only used emergency protocols for 2 reasons: active threats or team members in crisis. She opened the message and felt her blood pressure spike. Marcus Rivera's face filled the screen, older, weathered by civilian struggles she'd only heard about in passing, but unmistakably the explosives expert who'd served under her command through 3 brutal deployments. The accompanying video made her jaw clench with each passing second. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Chen had witnessed Marcus take shrapnel meant for his team outside Kandahar. She'd held pressure on his severed leg while they waited for medevac, had seen him refuse morphine so he could stay conscious and relay intel about secondary devices. She'd watched him maintain tactical awareness even as his life bled out onto Afghan soil. And now some civilian piece of garbage was humiliating him over a restaurant bill. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Walsh, her second-in-command, noticed her sudden silence. "Is everything all right?" Chen closed the tablet with military precision. "Cancel my meetings for the next 72 hours. I need to submit emergency leave." "Ma'am, the Admiral's briefing. Will proceed without me." Chen was already standing, her mind shifting into operational mode. "I have a brother who needs backup." 15 minutes later, she was in her quarters, making the first of several calls that would reshape the next 48 hours in Millfield. "Hammer," she said, when Jake Rodriguez answered on the second ring. "Drop whatever you're doing. We have a situation." Captain Jake "Hammer" Rodriguez had been reviewing architectural blueprints for a demolition project in downtown Los Angeles. When his secure phone buzzed, the former Navy SEAL now ran a successful construction company, but the tone in Chen's voice transported him instantly back to pre-mission briefings in Afghanistan. "What's the target, Phoenix?" "Marcus, civilian harassment. I'm sending you coordinates and intelligence. How fast can you move?" Rodriguez was already reaching for his keys. 2 hours if I push it. What's the mission parameters? Show of force. Demonstrate what happens when you mess with our people. Chen's voice carried the cold authority that had earned her respect. "In the teams, but Jake, we do this clean. No cowboys, no property damage, professional all the way." "Copy that. Hammer is rolling." Rodriguez cancelled his afternoon appointments with brief, apologetic calls, then loaded his truck with gear he hadn't touched in months: tactical clothing, communications equipment, and the kind of presence that civilian situations sometimes required. His construction crews would understand. Military brotherhood transcended business schedules. Meanwhile, Tyler Washington had established a surveillance perimeter around Millfield, his laptop transforming the rented SUV into a mobile command center. His fingers flew across multiple keyboards as he gathered intelligence on Thornton's Bistro, cross-referenced property records, and monitored social media for real-time community reaction. The video had exploded overnight. Current count, 87. 1,000 views across platforms, with shares accelerating every hour. Local news stations were picking up the story. Someone had created a GoFundMe for Marcus that had already raised $12,000 from strangers who'd been moved by his quiet dignity. "Phoenix," Tyler reported through encrypted channels. "Situation is evolving rapidly. Media attention increasing, community response mixed, but trending supportive of Rivera. What about the restaurant owner? Daniel Thornton, 35, inherited the business 18 months ago. Financial records show significant debt, multiple loan defaults, appears to be acting from desperation rather than malice, but that doesn't excuse the behavior." Chen processed this information while navigating San Diego traffic toward the airport. She'd learned long ago that understanding enemy motivation was crucial for mission success, even when that understanding didn't generate sympathy. "Ghost, I need you to locate every team member within driving distance. Full voluntary participation. Nobody gets pressure if they can't make it, but I want maximum presence for anyone who can roll." Tyler's database contained current contact information for their entire unit. Within minutes, secure messages were pinging phones across 3 states. Chief Petty Officer Mike "Reaper" Santos was changing oil in his garage in Phoenix when the alert came through. He'd been struggling with civilian transition for 2 years, bouncing between jobs and battling the kind of depression that came from feeling purposeless after a career built on life-or-death missions. The message from Chen cut through his malaise like a blade. "Pack your gear. Rivera needs us." Santos had served alongside Marcus for 5 years. They'd cleared buildings together, shared MREs in bombed-out compounds, had each other's backs. When Taliban fighters tried to overrun their position outside Helmand, Marcus had saved his life twice, once by spotting a pressure plate IED, once by providing covering fire during a hasty extraction. Santos was on the road within 30 minutes. Petty Officer First Class Lisa "Doc" Martinez received the message while conducting a training seminar for paramedics in Las Vegas. The former Navy corpsman had transitioned successfully to civilian emergency medicine, but the bonds forged in combat remained stronger than any professional obligation. She handed the class over to her assistant and headed for her car, medical kit already packed in her trunk, alongside gear she hoped they wouldn't need. Back in Millfield, Frank Morrison sat across from Marcus in the hardware store's break room, watching his friend struggle with unwanted fame. The younger veteran's hands shook slightly as he scrolled through comments on Mrs. Patterson's phone, reading messages of support mixed with expressions of outrage at his treatment. "I never wanted this," Marcus said quietly. "I just wanted to eat my dinner in peace." Frank had seen this before, the way public attention could re-traumatize veterans who'd already survived more than their share of scrutiny. "Son, sometimes the spotlight finds us whether we want it or not. Question is, what do we do with it?" "I don't know how to be anyone's hero, Frank. I'm barely keeping my own life together." "Who said anything about being a hero?" Frank leaned forward, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd navigated similar waters decades earlier. "Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is just keep standing up, keep moving forward despite everything trying to knock you down." Through the store's front window, Frank noticed the black SUVs parked across the street, men in civilian clothes but military-bearing, watching the building with professional interest. He'd been expecting this. "Marcus," Frank said carefully, "I think your brothers have come calling." Marcus looked up from the phone, confusion evident in his expression. "What do you mean?" "Look outside, son. Unless I'm mistaken, those are some serious people who've traveled a long way to make sure you're okay." Marcus moved to the window, and his breath caught as he recognized the tactical positioning of the vehicles, the coordinated surveillance pattern he'd learned to identify in Afghanistan. This wasn't random. This was military precision applied to civilian terrain. His secure phone, the one Tyler had given him years ago for emergency contact, buzzed with an incoming message. "Hold position. Cavalry is coming. Phoenix sends." Marcus stared at the screen, remembering his former commander's call sign, remembering what it felt like to be part of something larger than himself. For the first time since leaving the service, he wasn't alone. Outside, Tyler Washington adjusted his binoculars and spoke quietly into his headset. "All units, target is secure and aware. Phoenix, what's your ETA?" Chen's voice crackled through the communication system with the authority that had once commanded respect in the world's most dangerous places. 30 minutes out. "All teams converge on my position. Time to show this community what happens when you dishonor one of ours." The convoy rolled into Millfield at precisely 05:45 hours, 3 black SUVs moving in tactical formation through the pre-dawn streets of the coastal town. Commander Chen had coordinated their approach with the precision of a military operation, because that's exactly what this had become. Tyler Washington guided the lead vehicle from his overwatch position, his voice steady, through the encrypted communication system. "Phoenix, target area is clear. Local law enforcement appears unaware of our presence. Civilian activity minimal." "Copy that, Ghost." Chen's response carried the calm authority that had once directed operations in some of the world's most dangerous places. "All units, maintain standard ROE. We're here to make a statement, not start a war." The SUVs took predetermined positions around Thornton's Bistro, not close enough to seem threatening, but positioned to control sightlines and access routes with military efficiency. Chen had learned long ago that presence was often more powerful than action, and right now, presence was exactly what Marcus Rivera needed. Jake Rodriguez emerged from the second vehicle, his construction worker civilian clothes doing nothing to hide the bearing of a man accustomed to violence. At 6'2", with shoulders broadened by years of physical labor, Hammer carried himself with the controlled aggression of someone who'd learned to solve problems definitively. "Jesus, Phoenix," he said quietly, studying the rundown restaurant. "Through binoculars, this is where they humiliated Rivera, this piece of shit establishment. Maintain professionalism, Hammer." Chen's voice carried a warning edge. "We're here to restore honor, not destroy property." The third vehicle disgorged Doc Martinez and Reaper Santos, both veterans of multiple deployments who'd dropped Everything to answer the call. Martinez carried a medical kit out of habit. Old corpsman instincts died hard, while Santos moved with the fluid awareness of someone scanning for threats, even in suburban California. "Ghost, what's Rivera's current location?" Chen asked, adjusting her tactical vest beneath a civilian jacket. "Hardware store, 2 blocks north. He's with Frank Morrison, older veteran who witnessed the original incident." Both appear calm but alert. Chen nodded, processing the intelligence. Frank Morrison's presence was a complication. Another veteran meant another person with potential military experience who might interpret their actions unpredictably. But it also represented local support, validation that their response was justified. Maya Santos arrived for her opening shift at Thornton's Bistro to find a crowd gathered outside the restaurant, phones raised to capture whatever was about to unfold. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the decision to post that video, wondering if she'd made things better or worse for Marcus Rivera. The black SUVs hadn't been there when she'd left her apartment. Now they sat like sleeping predators there, occupants, invisible behind tinted windows, but their presence unmistakable. Maya felt her stomach tighten with the realization that her 47-second video had triggered something far beyond her intentions. "Excuse me, miss." The voice belonged to a woman in her 40s, Asian American, with the kind of quiet confidence that made people listen without being asked twice. "Are you Maya Santos?" Maya nodded, suddenly aware that she was at the center of something much larger than a viral video. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Commander Chen. I served with Marcus Rivera in Afghanistan." The woman's introduction was simple, but Maya heard volumes in the way she said Rivera's name: respect, loyalty, and barely controlled anger. "We need to talk." Inside Morrison's hardware, Frank Morrison poured coffee with hands that remained steady despite the tactical situation. Developing outside, he'd been expecting this ever since he'd recognized the military bearing of the surveillance team, but the scale of the response impressed even his Vietnam-era sensibilities. "How many?" Marcus asked, his own training allowing him to interpret. The careful positioning of vehicles and personnel outside. "Best guess, full SEAL team. Maybe more." Frank handed Marcus a steaming mug. "Your former CO doesn't mess around when it comes to protecting her people." And Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, though his hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that his brothers hadn't forgotten him. For 2 years, he'd struggled with the isolation that came with civilian transition, the sense that his military family had moved on while he remained trapped in memories and nightmares. "I don't deserve this," Marcus said quietly. "It was just a restaurant bill. Son, it was never about the money." Frank's voice carried the wisdom of someone who'd learned hard lessons about respect and dignity. It was about how that man treated you and what that treatment says about how this community values the people who served. Through the store's front window, they watched Commander Chen emerge from the lead SUV. Even in civilian clothes, her bearing was unmistakably military, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. She moved with purposeful stride toward the restaurant, flanked by team members who maintained professional spacing while projecting undeniable menace. Elena Thornton had arrived at the family restaurant early, hoping to assess the damage from the previous night's social media explosion. Instead, she found herself face to face with a situation that clearly exceeded her son's ability to handle. The woman approaching her carried herself with an authority that reminded Eleanor of her late husband's military friends, men who'd learned leadership in places where mistakes meant death. This was someone accustomed to command, and Elena felt a chill of recognition at what that might mean for her family's business. "Mrs. Thornton?" Chen's voice was polite but firm. "I'm Commander Chen, United States Navy. I believe we need to discuss your son's treatment of one of my former team members." Elena's throat went dry. "Commander, my son made a mistake. We're prepared to make amends." "Ma'am, with respect, your son didn't make a mistake. He made a choice, a deliberate decision to humiliate a wounded veteran who trusted that he'd be treated with basic human dignity." Chen's words were measured, professional, but Elena could hear the steel beneath them. "Now we're here to make some choices of our own." Inside the restaurant, Danny Thornton watched through the kitchen window as military professionals took control of his parking lot with practiced efficiency. His phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters, angry customers, relatives who'd seen the video, but he'd stopped answering after realizing that every conversation made things worse. Now, watching the SEAL team deploy around his restaurant like they were preparing to liberate it from hostile forces, Danny finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done. This wasn't just about a restaurant bill anymore. This was about honor, respect, and the kind of brotherhood forged in combat zones where men learn to trust each other with their lives. Dr. Amanda Foster received the call at 06:30 from Mayor Patricia Williams, who'd been monitoring the situation. Since the early morning news mentioned military personnel gathering in downtown Millfield. "Amanda, we may have a situation developing at Thornton's Bistro. Can you get down there? If tensions escalate, we'll need someone who understands both military and civilian perspectives." Foster, a former military psychologist who treated PTSD in veterans for over a decade, understood the subtext. She'd worked with enough former special operations personnel to recognize the potential for controlled violence when warriors felt their own had been dishonored. She arrived at Thornton's to find a crowd gathering, phones recording every moment as the situation unfolded. The SEAL team's deployment was textbook professional. No aggression, no threats, just the kind of overwhelming presence that made further discussion unnecessary. Commander Chen stood in front of the restaurant now, her team flanked behind her, in a formation that spoke of shared experience and absolute trust. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the parking lot. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here on behalf of Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera, United States Navy, wounded in service to his country. We have a business proposition for the management of this establishment." The crowd fell silent, phones still. Recording, as Chen continued with the kind of calm authority that made generals listen and enemies surrender. "We'd like to rent this facility for the day. We have cash, and we're prepared to pay above market rates. All we ask in return is the opportunity to show this community what honor looks like." At precisely 1100 hours, Commander Chen stepped through the front door of Thornton's Bistro, her team following in formation with the fluid precision of warriors who'd executed countless operations together. The restaurant's usual morning bustle died instantly as every conversation stopped, every head turned, every civilian instinct recognized the presence of lethal professionals operating under strict discipline. Chen moved to the center of the dining room, her bearing commanding attention without demanding it. Behind her, Rodriguez positioned himself near the kitchen entrance, while Tyler maintained overwatch near the front windows. Doc Martinez and Ripa Santos flanked the bar area, their placement ensuring complete tactical awareness of the space. "Mr. Thornton," Chen called out, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made colonels straighten their spines. "We need to discuss terms." Danny emerged from behind the bar, his face pale, with the realization that his small act of cruelty had brought professional warriors to his doorstep. His hands shook slightly as he approached the woman whose mere presence had transformed his struggling restaurant into a theater of operations. "Commander," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper, "What can I do for you?" Chen reached into her jacket and withdrew a leather portfolio, opening it to reveal neat stacks of $100 bills. The sight of cash drew audible gasps from the handful of morning customers who'd remained to witness the unfolding drama. We're here to make you a business proposition, Mr. Thornton. We want to rent your establishment for the next 12 hours. Exclusive use. No other customers. No interruptions. Chen's tone was professional, businesslike, but every word carried the weight of non-negotiable command. We're prepared to pay $15,000, cash. The number hit Danny like a physical blow. 15,000 was more than he'd made in profit during the past 2 months combined. It represented enough money to catch up on overdue loan payments, to buy groceries without checking his bank balance, to sleep without nightmares about bankruptcy lawyers. 15,000, Danny repeated, staring at the money with the kind of desperate hunger that comes from months of financial terror. That's correct. Chen closed the portfolio with decisive snap. In exchange, we want complete access to transform this space for a veteran appreciation event. We'll provide our own food, our own service, our own security. All we need from you is the building and your cooperation. Maya Santos stood behind the counter, watching the exchange with growing amazement. She'd uploaded a video hoping to expose injustice, never imagining it would bring Navy SEALs to Millfield with briefcases full of cash and a lesson in military brotherhood. Rodriguez stepped forward, his construction-trained eye already assessing the restaurant's layout. We'll need to rearrange furniture, hang some banners, set up a presentation area. Nothing permanent, nothing damaged. Professional installation and removal. Tyler opened his laptop on a nearby table, the screen displaying a detailed floor plan he'd somehow acquired overnight. Sound system requirements, seating configuration for approximately 50 people, space for media coverage, full restoration to original condition before we depart. The precision of their planning was overwhelming. These weren't men making impulsive gestures. They were executing a carefully coordinated operation designed to achieve specific, strategic objectives. Elena Thornton entered through the back kitchen door, having watched the morning's developments. With growing understanding of what her son had triggered, she studied the SEAL team with the appraising eye of someone who'd been married to a veteran, recognizing the controlled professionalism that marked elite military units. "Commander Chen," she said, stepping into the conversation with dignity that matched the officer's bearing. "I'm Elena Thornton, Daniel's mother. Before you proceed, I think you should know that this restaurant was built by my late husband, who served in Vietnam. He would be ashamed of what happened here yesterday." Chen's expression softened slightly, professional respect acknowledging another military family. "Ma'am, I understand this is difficult. We're not here to destroy your family's legacy. We're here to restore it." The commander turned back to Danny, her voice taking on an edge that made the air in the restaurant feel charged with electricity. "Mr. Thornton, yesterday you made a choice to humiliate a wounded warrior who served his country with honor. Today, we're offering you a choice to make amends." She gestured toward the portfolio of cash. "This money represents more than payment for your facility. It represents an opportunity for redemption, a chance to transform a place of shame into a symbol of honor. The question is whether you're man enough to take it." Danny's throat worked soundlessly as he stared at the money, then at the faces surrounding him, his mother's disappointment, Maya's hope, the professional expectations of warriors who'd traveled hundreds of miles to right a wrong. What exactly are you planning to do?" he asked. Tyler's fingers flew over his keyboard, pulling up images and documents. "A veteran appreciation ceremony honoring Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera and all service members who've struggled. With civilian transition, food provided by local veteran-owned businesses, presentations on PTSD awareness, job training programs, community support resources." Doc Martinez spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the compassion of someone who'd treated battlefield wounds and civilian trauma. "We're going to show this community what supporting veterans actually looks like, Mr. Thornton. Not charity, not pity, respect and practical assistance. Rodriguez pulled out architectural sketches, his construction experience evident in the detailed planning. We'll install temporary lighting, professional audio equipment, seating arrangements that accommodate wheelchairs and prosthetics. This isn't just a party. It's a demonstration of how communities should honor military service. The scope of their preparation was staggering. Chen's team hadn't just responded to a viral video, they'd developed a comprehensive community engagement strategy designed to transform one moment of injustice into lasting positive change. Elena stepped closer to her son, her voice carrying decades of maternal authority. "Daniel, your father built this place to serve the community, especially those who served our country. These people are offering you a chance to honor his memory." Danny looked around the restaurant, seeing it through new eyes. The faded photographs on the walls, the American flag his father had hung near the register, the memorial corner dedicated to local veterans, all symbols of values he'd forgotten. In his desperation to keep the business afloat, Maya moved from behind the counter, her youthful idealism shining in her eyes. "Mr. Thornton, Marcus Rivera comes here every Tuesday. He sits alone, orders the same meal, never complains about anything. Yesterday you hurt him. Today, these people want to honor him. Isn't that what we should be doing?" The silence stretched for long moments as Danny struggled with the weight of decision. Finally, he looked directly at Commander Chen, meeting her eyes with something approaching dignity. "What do you need me to do?" Chen's smile was warrior-sharp, but genuine. "Get out of our way, Mr. Thornton. And maybe, if you're lucky, learn something about honor." As the cash changed hands and Chen's team began their transformation of Thornton's Bistro into something worthy of warriors, word spread through Millfield that something unprecedented was happening downtown. By noon, crowds would gather to witness what happened when Brotherhood answered injustice with overwhelming force, applied through disciplined professionalism. The message was clear: disrespect one veteran and you'll answer to all of them. With the restaurant secured and the transformation underway, Commander Chen requested a private meeting with Danny Thornton in the back office. The space felt cramped. With her presence, file cabinets stuffed with unpaid bills, a desk cluttered with desperate correspondence from creditors, walls that seemed to close in under the weight of accumulated failure. Chen seated herself across from Danny's desk with the measured control of someone accustomed to conducting interrogations. She placed a manila folder between them, its contents hidden but somehow threatening in their concealment. "Mr. Thornton," she began, her voice carrying the kind of professional calm that preceded life-changing conversations. "Before we proceed with today's event, I think it's important that you understand exactly who you chose to humiliate yesterday." Danny's hands trembled as he reached for the folder. Inside, he found printed screenshots from the viral video, but also documents he'd never seen: military records, commendation letters, photographs that told the story of Marcus Rivera's service in ways that statistics couldn't capture. The first image showed Marcus in full combat gear, standing beside what appeared to be a massive pile of diffused explosives. The caption read, "Staff Sergeant Rivera, Kandahar Province, 2019. 47 IEDs neutralized in 6-month deployment." "Your customer," Chen continued, "is one of the most decorated explosive ordnance disposal specialists in Navy SEAL history. The roadside bombs he defused saved hundreds of American lives and countless Afghan civilians." Danny turned the page, finding a photograph of Marcus receiving a Purple Heart while lying in a hospital bed, his left leg clearly amputated above the knee. The image was devastating in its quiet dignity, a young warrior accepting recognition for wounds that would reshape his entire existence. He lost that leg, saving his team from a secondary device. could have retreated when the primary bomb detonated, but he stayed to ensure his brothers made it out alive. Chen's voice never changed inflection, but Danny felt the judgment in every syllable. The explosion that took his leg was meant for all of them. The office door opened, and Elena Thornton entered without knocking. She'd clearly been listening from the kitchen, her maternal instincts recognizing the moment when her son would need support, or witnesses to his reckoning. "Mom, please," Danny began. "No, Daniel." Elena's voice carried the authority of someone who'd raised children and buried a husband, who'd learned to distinguish between shame and accountability. "I want to hear this. I want to understand what kind of man you've become." Chen acknowledged Elena with a respectful nod before continuing. After his medical discharge, Staff Sergeant Rivera struggled with what we call civilian transition challenges. PTSD, depression, unemployment, the invisible wounds that often prove more difficult to treat than physical injuries. She turned to another document, this one showing Marcus's employment history since leaving the service. The list was heartbreaking. In its brevity, a series of part-time positions, gaps in employment, the kind of resume that suggested someone society had forgotten despite their sacrifice. He works at Morrison's Hardware 20 hours a week because that's all his disability allows without losing benefits. He lives in a studio apartment above the auto shop because it's what he can afford. He comes to your restaurant every Tuesday because it reminds him of better times with his grandfather. Chen's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing the anger beneath. And you chose to exploit that loyalty, that trust, for $30. Danny felt his defensive walls crumbling under the weight of evidence and testimony. "I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know." Chen's interruption was surgical, precise. "You saw a quiet man you thought wouldn't fight back, and you decided to take advantage of that perceived weakness." Elena moved closer to her son's desk, studying the photographs and documents with growing horror. "Daniel, look at these pictures. Really look at them." The images told a story of service and sacrifice that reduced Danny's financial struggles to insignificant noise. Here was a man who'd risked everything for strangers, who'd lost pieces of himself in service to ideals larger than personal comfort, who'd returned home to find that his sacrifice meant less than quarterly profit margins. "You want to know what really pisses me off?" Chen's composure finally cracked, revealing the fierce protectiveness that had made her an effective combat leader. "It's not just that you overcharged him, it's that you enjoyed it. The video shows you watching from behind the bar, smiling while a better man than you'll ever be paid 3 times what he owed without complaint." Danny's face flushed with shame as he remembered that moment, the brief satisfaction he'd felt at finally having power over someone, at being able to pass along the pain that creditors and ex-wives and circumstances had inflicted on him. "I was angry," he whispered. "The business is failing, the bills are piling up, and he always seemed so calm, so together. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be helpless." "Helpless?" Chen's voice rose for the first time, professional control giving way to righteous fury. "You think Marcus Rivera doesn't know about helplessness. You think the man who learned to walk again after losing his leg doesn't understand struggle." Eleanor placed a hand on Chen's shoulder, the gesture carrying surprising authority. "Commander, my son is weak. I've known that for years. But weak isn't the same as evil, and I think you know that too." Chen looked at Elena with new respect, recognizing someone who understood both accountability and compassion. "Mom, you're right. But weakness that chooses cruelty becomes something worse than evil. It becomes cowardice." The room fell silent except for the sound of Danny's labored breathing as he struggled with emotions he'd buried under months of self-pity and resentment. Finally, he looked up at Commander Chen with something approaching dignity. "What can I do to make this right?" Chen studied him for long moments, measuring the sincerity of his question against the magnitude of his offense. "Mr. Thornton, making this right isn't about one gesture or one payment. It's about understanding that honor isn't something you can buy. It's something you earn through consistent action." She reached into her jacket and produced a business card for a veteran service organization. "You want to start making amends? Learn about the men and women who've served. Volunteer at the VA hospital. Hire veterans when you can. Turn this place into what your father intended, a business that serves the community instead of exploiting it." Elena took the card from Chen's hands, studying it with interest. "Commander, what if we went further? What if we made supporting veterans part of this restaurant's mission?" Chen's expression softened as she considered the proposal. "Ma'am, that would be meaningful, but it would require commitment, consistency, follow-through, not just good intentions." Danny looked between his mother and the naval officer, finally understanding that this moment represented more than punishment. It was an opportunity for transformation that he'd never imagined possible. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "Whatever it takes, I'll do it." Chen nodded slowly, recognizing something in his voice that hadn't been there before. Not just remorse, but resolve. "Then we'll start today, Mr. Thornton, and we'll see if you're capable of becoming the man your father hoped you'd be." The afternoon sun streamed through the transformed windows of Thornton's Bistro as news crews began arriving in Millfield. Jessica Kim, investigative reporter for Channel 7 News, parked her van among the growing crowd of vehicles and stepped out into what had become the epicenter of a story that was reshaping from viral moment into national conversation. Inside the restaurant, now decorated with American flags and veteran support banners, Commander Chen had created something unprecedented, a safe space where warriors could speak truths they'd carried in silence for years. Marcus Rivera sat at a corner table, surrounded by his former SEAL team members, finally breaking down the walls he'd built around his civilian struggles. The transformation was visible to everyone present, the rigid control he'd maintained, since leaving the service, giving way to raw honesty about wounds that went far deeper than his missing leg. "I wake up every morning and put on the prosthetic," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do my physical therapy. I go to work. I come home. I tell myself I'm fine, that I'm handling the transition." He paused, struggling with words that had been trapped inside him for 2 years. "But I'm not fine. I haven't been fine since Kandahar." Jake Rodriguez leaned forward, recognizing something in Marcus's tone that resonated with his own hidden struggles. "Brother, none of us are fine. You think any of us figured out how to be civilians without losing pieces of ourselves?" The admission hung in the air like a confession at church. These were Navy SEALs, elite warriors trained to overcome impossible odds, to complete missions that regular soldiers couldn't attempt. The idea that they might struggle with civilian life contradicted everything popular culture taught about military heroes. "I've been in anger management therapy for 18 months, Rodriguez continued, his voice carrying the weight of admission. "Turns out, the skills that kept us alive over there don't translate well to construction site disagreements or traffic jams." Tyler Washington, monitoring social media feeds on his laptop, looked up from his screens. "The statistics are getting worse every year. 22 veteran suicides daily. Homelessness rates among post-9/11 veterans climbing steadily. We're losing more people to civilian transition than we lost in combat." Doc Martinez, her medical training making her the natural counselor among them, addressed the elephant in the room. "Marcus, what happened yesterday at this restaurant? That wasn't about money. That was about respect, about being seen as a human being instead of an inconvenience." Marcus nodded, tears he'd held back for months finally finding their way down his cheeks. I used to lead men into combat. I made life-or-death decisions. Now I stock shelves 20 hours a week and can't afford basic dental care. Sometimes I wonder if the roadside bomb should have finished the job. The words hit the room like physical blows. Chen felt her chest tighten with recognition of how close they'd come to losing another team member to the invisible war that continued long after the shooting stopped. "That's why we're here," Chen said firmly. "That's why we dropped everything and drove hundreds of miles. Because you matter, Marcus. Your life matters. Your service matters. And anyone who treats you otherwise answers to all of us." Elena Thornton had been listening from the kitchen, her understanding of her son's actions deepening with each revelation. She approached the table carefully, carrying a coffee pot and the kind of maternal instincts that recognized suffering regardless of its source. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the empty chair beside Marcus. Chen nodded, recognizing that Elena's presence might provide perspective they needed. "My husband served in Vietnam," Elena began, settling into the chair with practiced grace. "He came home to people spitting on his uniform, calling him baby killer, treating him like he was contaminated by war." She poured coffee for each of the SEALs with steady hands. It took him years to understand that their hatred wasn't about him. It was about their own fear and guilt. Frank Morrison appeared in the doorway, having been invited by Chen to share his own experiences with veteran transition. At 68, he represented the generational bridge between Vietnam-era struggles and modern military challenges. "Elena's right about the hatred," Frank said, accepting a cup of coffee. "But what we're seeing now is almost worse. Indifference. Society says they support the troops, then ignores us when we come home broken." He looked directly at Marcus, veteran to veteran. "Son, I've been where you are, living paycheck to paycheck, wondering if anybody remembers or cares about what you sacrificed. It's a different kind of combat, and the casualty rate is just as real." Maya Santos joined the growing circle, her youth and civilian perspective adding another dimension to the conversation. "I didn't understand any of this before yesterday," she admitted. "I knew my father served, knew he died in Afghanistan, but I never thought about what happened to the ones who came home." She pulled out her phone, showing them the continuing explosion of social media response to the original video. There are thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories. Veterans talking about discrimination, family members describing loved ones who struggled with transition, civilians admitting they never understood the challenges. Dr. Amanda Foster arrived as Maya was speaking, her professional training immediately, recognizing the therapeutic dynamic that had developed in the restaurant. As a former military psychologist, she understood that this kind of group sharing could be more healing than months of individual counseling. "What's happening here is remarkable," Dr. Foster observed, settling into another chair. "You're creating the kind of support network that research shows is most effective for veteran mental health: peer connection, shared experience, mutual understanding." Tyler looked up from his laptop, his expression serious. "Phoenix, we've got a problem. The story is going national. CNN wants interviews. Fox News is sending a crew. This is becoming bigger than we planned." Chen processed this information with tactical awareness. Media attention could amplify their message about veteran support, but it could also transform Marcus's personal healing into public spectacle. "Marcus," she said carefully, "this is your call. We can shut down media access, keep this about community, healing, or we can use the platform to educate people about veteran issues, but I won't let anyone exploit your story for ratings." Marcus looked around the table at faces that represented different aspects of his struggle: military brothers who understood combat trauma, civilians learning to bridge the gap, professionals offering resources for healing. If talking about, "This helps other veterans," he said slowly. "If it prevents someone else from feeling as alone as I've felt, then maybe it's worth it." Elena placed her hand over Marcus's, the gesture carrying maternal comfort he hadn't experienced since his own grandmother's death. "My son hurt you because he was drowning in his own problems. But maybe this is how we all learn to swim, by helping each other stay afloat." The afternoon light continued streaming through the windows, illuminating a scene that would be remembered as the moment when one veteran's quiet dignity became the catalyst for community transformation. Jessica Kim's news van was the first of 7 media vehicles that descended upon Millfield by late afternoon, transforming the quiet coastal town into the epicenter of a national conversation about veteran treatment and community responsibility. She positioned herself strategically across from Thornton's Bistro, her camera operator capturing establishing shots while she prepared for what would become the most important story of her career. As the daughter of a Korean War veteran, Jessica understood that this story transcended viral video entertainment. It represented something deeper about how America treated its returning warriors. Her father had shared stories of post-war struggles that she'd never fully comprehended until watching Marcus Rivera's quiet dignity in the face of deliberate humiliation. This is Jessica Kim reporting from Millfield, California, where a viral video showing the mistreatment of a wounded veteran has prompted an unprecedented response from his former Navy SEAL teammates. She began, her voice carrying the gravity appropriate to the unfolding story. Inside the restaurant, Commander Chen watched the media circus developing through the front windows with tactical concern. She'd anticipated local coverage, but the presence of national news crews created complications that required careful management. "Tyler, what's the current reach on social media?" she asked. Tyler's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, monitoring multiple platforms simultaneously. Original video has passed 2 million views across all platforms. The hashtag Dutch Honors Prize is trending nationally. We've got support messages from veteran organizations, active duty personnel, and civilian advocates from all 50 states. The scope of public response was overwhelming. GoFundMe campaigns for Marcus had raised over $40,000. Veteran employment organizations were offering job interviews. Mental health professionals were volunteering services. The story had tapped into something much larger than one moment of injustice. But the media attention also brought unwanted scrutiny and competing narratives that threatened to overshadow the original message. CNN's national correspondent arrived with a full production crew, immediately requesting interviews with Marcus and the SEAL team. Fox News followed 30 minutes later, their reporter already crafting angles about military overreach and civilian business rights. Social media influencers with no connection to veteran issues began live streaming from the parking lot, treating the serious story as content opportunity. Danny Thornton found himself at the center of a media storm he was completely unprepared to handle. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, but each conversation seemed designed to trap him into soundbites that would either make him look worse or exploit his redemption for entertainment value. "You don't know what to say to them," Danny confided to his mother as they watched reporters setting up equipment outside. "Everything I say gets twisted into something I didn't mean." Elena studied the media circus with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through multiple decades of news cycles. "Daniel, you don't owe these people anything. Your apology belongs to Marcus Rivera and this community. Don't let them turn your mistakes into their profits." Commander Chen made the tactical decision to control media access rather than allow unrestricted interviews that might exploit Marcus's vulnerability. She positioned Rodriguez and Santos at strategic points to manage crowd flow while she handled spokesperson duties. "Ladies and gentlemen, Chen addressed the assembled media from the restaurant's entrance, her naval bearing commanding immediate attention. Maya Santos joined the growing circle, her youth and civilian perspective adding another dimension to the conversation. "I didn't understand any of this before yesterday," she admitted. "I knew my father served, knew he died in Afghanistan, but I never thought about what happened to the ones who came home." She pulled out her phone, showing them the continuing explosion of social media response to the original video. There are thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories. Veterans talking about discrimination, family members describing loved ones who struggled with transition, civilians admitting they never understood the challenges. Dr. Amanda Foster arrived as Maya was speaking, her professional training immediately, recognizing the therapeutic dynamic that had developed in the restaurant. As a former military psychologist, she understood that this kind of group sharing could be more healing than months of individual counseling. "What's happening here is remarkable," Dr. Foster observed, settling into another chair. "You're creating the kind of support network that research shows is most effective for veteran mental health. Peer connection, shared experience, mutual understanding." Tyler looked up from his laptop, his expression serious. "Phoenix, we've got a problem. The story is going national. CNN wants interviews. Fox News is sending a crew. This is becoming bigger than we planned." Chen processed this information with tactical awareness. Media attention could amplify their message about veteran support, but it could also transform Marcus's personal healing into public spectacle. "Marcus," she said carefully, "this is your call. We can shut down media access, keep this about community, healing, or we can use the platform to educate people about veteran issues, but I won't let anyone exploit your story for ratings." Marcus looked around the table at faces that represented different aspects of his struggle. Military brothers who understood combat trauma, civilians learning to bridge the gap, professionals offering resources for healing. "If talking about this helps other veterans," he said slowly, "if it prevents someone else from feeling as alone as I've felt, then maybe it's worth it." Elena placed her hand over Marcus's, the gesture carrying maternal comfort he hadn't experienced since his own grandmother's death. "My son hurt you because he was drowning in his own problems. But maybe this is how we all learn to swim, by helping each other stay afloat." The afternoon light continued streaming through the windows, illuminating a scene that would be remembered as the moment when one veteran's quiet dignity became the catalyst for community transformation. Jessica Kim's news van was the first of 7 media vehicles that descended upon Millfield by late afternoon, transforming the quiet coastal town into the epicenter of a national conversation about veteran treatment and community responsibility. She positioned herself strategically across from Thornton's Bistro, her camera operator capturing establishing shots while she prepared for what would become the most important story of her career. As the daughter of a Korean War veteran, Jessica understood that this story transcended viral video entertainment. It represented something deeper about how America treated its returning warriors. Her father had shared stories of post-war struggles that she'd never fully comprehended until watching Marcus Rivera's quiet dignity in the face of deliberate humiliation. This is Jessica Kim, reporting from Millfield, California, where a viral video showing the mistreatment of a wounded veteran has prompted an unprecedented response from his former Navy SEAL teammates. She began, her voice carrying the gravity appropriate to the unfolding story. Inside the restaurant, Commander Chen watched the media circus developing through the front windows with tactical concern. She'd anticipated local coverage, but the presence of national news crews created complications that required careful management. "Tyler, what's the current reach on social media?" she asked. Tyler's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, monitoring multiple platforms simultaneously. "Original video has passed 2 million views across all platforms. The hashtag Dry Honours Price is trending nationally. We've got support messages from veteran organizations, active duty personnel, and civilian advocates from all 50 states. The scope of public response was overwhelming. GoFundMe campaigns for Marcus had raised over $40,000. Veteran employment organizations were offering job interviews. Mental health professionals were volunteering services. The story had tapped into something much larger than one moment of injustice. But the media attention also brought unwanted scrutiny and competing narratives that threatened to overshadow the original message. CNN's national correspondent arrived with a full production crew, immediately requesting interviews with Marcus and the SEAL team. Fox News followed 30 minutes later, their reporter already crafting angles about military overreach and civilian business rights. Social media influencers with no connection to veteran issues began live streaming from the parking lot, treating the serious story as content opportunity. Danny Thornton found himself at the center of a media storm he was completely unprepared to handle. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, but each conversation seemed designed to trap him into sound bites that would either make him look worse or exploit his redemption for entertainment value. "I don't know what to say to them," Danny confided to his mother as they watched reporters setting up equipment outside. "Everything I say gets twisted into something I didn't mean." Elena studied the media circus with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through multiple decades of news cycles. "Daniel, you don't owe these people anything. Your apology belongs to Marcus Rivera and this community. Don't let them turn your mistakes into their profits." Commander Chen made the tactical decision to control media access, rather than allow unrestricted interviews that might exploit Marcus's vulnerability. She positioned Rodriguez and Santos at strategic points to manage crowd flow while she handled spokesperson duties. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen addressed the assembled media from the restaurant's entrance, her navel bearing commanding immediate attention. "We'll be conducting a limited number of interviews this afternoon. Our priority is honoring Staff Sergeant Rivera and educating the public about veteran transition challenges, not creating entertainment." Jessica Kim raised her hand, her professional reputation earning her first access. "Commander Chen, can you explain what brought your team to Millfield?" "When we learned that one of our own was being mistreated, we responded the way military families always respond, with overwhelming support and a clear message that disrespecting veterans has consequences." Chen's answer was measured, professional, but carried undertones that made civilians shift uncomfortably. "Some critics are calling your response disproportionate," pressed a Fox News correspondent. $15,000 and a full SEAL team deployment over a restaurant bill? Chen's smile was razor-sharp. "Sir, if you think honoring a Purple Heart recipient who lost his leg serving his country is disproportionate, then you've missed the entire point of this story." Inside the restaurant, Marcus found himself struggling with the attention despite his earlier agreement to participate. The weight of cameras, the pressure of representing all veterans, the fear of saying something wrong. It triggered anxiety responses he'd learned to manage in private, but couldn't control under public scrutiny. Dr. Foster recognized the signs, immediately positioning herself between Marcus and the most aggressive reporters, while signaling Chen that intervention was needed. "Marcus," Dr. Foster said quietly, "you don't have to carry this burden alone. Let your team help manage the message while you focus on healing." Maya Santos had become an unexpected spokesperson for her generation's response to veteran issues. Multiple news outlets wanted interviews with the college student whose moral courage had sparked the national conversation. "I just posted a video because what I saw was wrong," Maya told Jessica Kim during a carefully managed interview. "I never imagined it would lead to all this. But if it helps people understand what veterans go through, if it makes us better at supporting the people who served, then maybe something good comes from something terrible." Her words resonated across social media, generating thousands of supportive comments from young Americans who'd never considered veteran transition challenges, until her 47-second video opened their eyes. However, the media attention also attracted criticism and counter-narratives that complicated the story's impact. Some commentators questioned the SEAL's methods, suggesting their response amounted to intimidation. Others argued that Danny Thornton was being unfairly punished for business decisions that, while insensitive, weren't illegal. Anonymous social media accounts began attacking all parties involved, turning what should have been a conversation about respect and dignity into another polarized debate that missed the fundamental human elements of the story. Tyler monitored these developments with growing concern. Phoenix were losing control of the narrative. The trolls and political commentators are trying to make this about everything except veteran support. Chen nodded grimly, recognizing that media attention was a double-edged weapon that could cut both ways. Time to refocus on what matters. Get me 5 minutes with the main network correspondents. I want to make something very clear. She stepped outside to address the assembled media one final time, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command in life-or-death situations. "Let me be absolutely clear about why we're here," Chen began, her words measured but forceful. "This isn't about politics. This isn't about military versus civilian authority. This is about a wounded warrior who was deliberately humiliated by someone who thought he wouldn't fight back." She gestured toward the restaurant, now decorated with symbols of military service and community support. "What you're witnessing is what happens when brothers look out for each other, when people choose honor over convenience, when communities decide that supporting veterans means more than just saying, 'Thank you for your service.'" The cameras rolled, capturing words that would be replayed across the country, as Commander Chen delivered the message that would define how this story was remembered. "We came here to restore honor. Everything else is just noise." The weight of national attention pressed down on Millfield as evening approached. Inside Thornton's Bistro, Marcus Rivera stared at legal documents that could change everything, a discrimination lawsuit drafted by civil rights attorneys who'd arrived from Los Angeles within hours of the story breaking. "Mr. Rivera, you have a clear case," explained attorney Sarah Martinez. "Deliberate overcharging, public humiliation, damages. We could seek significant compensation and policy changes." Marcus studied the papers, his prosthetic leg aching with phantom pain that worsened under stress. Around him, the transformed restaurant hummed with activity. His SEAL brothers maintaining security, Dr. Foster counseling veterans, Maya Santos coordinating with volunteer organizations. "What would it accomplish?" Marcus asked quietly. "Justice, accountability, a message that this behavior has consequences." Jake Rodriguez watched from across the room, his anger management issues triggered by what he saw as insufficient punishment. "Marcus, you can't just let this slide. This guy humiliated you because he thought you were weak. Now you're proving him right." The words hit like a physical blow. Commander Chen immediately stepped between them. "Stand down, Hammer. That's not helping." But Rodriguez's frustration had been building for hours. "No, Phoenix. I'm tired of watching good men get crushed while cowards hide behind excuses. This restaurant owner needs real consequences, not just writing a check." Tyler Washington, monitoring social media, tried to provide objective analysis. The online response is split. Veterans support legal action. Civilian business owners express concern about precedent. We're at a tipping point. Eleanor Thornton emerged from the kitchen, approaching Marcus with deliberate dignity. "Mr. Rivera, may I speak with you?" Mother to son. She sat across from him, hands folded respectfully. "My son did something terrible. Something that dishonored everything this restaurant was supposed to represent." She gestured toward faded photographs of local veterans on the walls. "This place was built to honor men like you. My husband would be ashamed. But I know my son. He's not evil, he's weak, scared, drowning in problems he can't solve. What he did was wrong, but destroying him won't help other veterans who might face similar treatment." Dr. Foster recognized the therapeutic opportunity. Eleanor raises important points about restorative versus punitive justice. Sometimes the most healing path isn't inflicting maximum damage on the offender. Rodriguez wasn't satisfied. This isn't group therapy. This is about sending a message that veterans won't be treated like second-class citizens. "And what message does that send?" Marcus asked quietly, surprising everyone. "That we solve problems with overwhelming force? That we can't forgive someone genuinely trying to change?" The room fell silent as Marcus found his voice. "Hammer, you're right. I can't let this slide. But maybe there's a difference between letting it slide and choosing how to respond." He looked around at the transformed restaurant. "Danny Thornton hurt me because he was hurting. But look what his cruelty created. Veterans sharing stories, civilians learning about military service, community members offering support." Maya looked up from her phone. "Mr. Rivera, the GoFundMe campaigns have raised $60,000. 3 veteran organizations offered job training. The VA wants to use your story for outreach." Tyler nodded at his laptop. "The hashtag #SharkHonorsPrice is being used by veterans nationwide to share discrimination and recovery stories. Your experience is helping people who thought they were alone." Marcus felt something shifting, the first stirring of purpose since leaving service. Maybe that's worth more than a lawsuit. Maybe changing how communities treat veterans is more important than punishing one man who made a terrible choice. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Rivera, if you choose forgiveness, I promise this restaurant will become everything it was supposed to be. A place that honors, employs, and supports veterans." Commander Chen watched with growing understanding. "Marcus, whatever you decide, your team supports you. But remember, forgiveness isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the hardest thing a warrior can do." Marcus pushed the legal documents aside. "I want to make a statement, not to lawyers or media, to Danny Thornton, man to man. The decision would reshape how this story would be remembered." 6 months later, Marcus Rivera stood at the podium inside what was now called Honors Table. The restaurant transformed beyond recognition. American flags hung alongside photos of local veterans, while banners displayed the names of veteran-owned businesses throughout Millfield. The grand reopening ceremony drew hundreds of community members, but Marcus's attention focused on the familiar faces scattered throughout the crowd. Commander Chen sat at the front table with her SEAL team, all of whom had returned for this moment. Their intervention had sparked something larger than anyone anticipated. Honors Table now employed 12 veterans, offered job training programs, and provided free meals to any service member facing financial hardship. Danny Thornton worked behind the bar, his transformation as remarkable as the restaurant's. 6 months of volunteering at the VA hospital, partnering with veteran organizations, and learning about military service had changed him from bitter failure to community advocate. He discovered that helping others heal had somehow begun healing himself. "When I walked into this restaurant 6 months ago," Marcus began, his voice carrying across the packed dining room, "I was a man who'd forgotten his own worth. I'd convinced myself that keeping quiet, avoiding conflict, was the same as maintaining dignity." Elena Thornton, now co-manager with her son, dabbed at her eyes. The restaurant had become profitable for the first time in years, not through exploitation, but through genuine community service. "What I learned is that dignity isn't about staying silent when you're wronged. It's about choosing how to respond when you have the power to hurt someone back. Marcus's gaze found Danny, who stood frozen behind the bar. Danny Thornton made a terrible choice that night, but his mother was right. Destroying him wouldn't have helped other veterans. Frank Morrison, whose auto shop had become part of a veteran employment network, nodded approvingly. The network had reduced local veteran unemployment by 40%. Maya Santos, now graduated and working full-time for a veteran advocacy organization, smiled from her table near the window. Her viral video had launched her into a career she'd never imagined, connecting young Americans with veteran issues. Instead of pursuing litigation, we chose transformation, Marcus continued. This restaurant proves that communities can change, that businesses can profit by serving rather than exploiting, that one moment of injustice can become the catalyst for lasting good. Dr. Foster, whose expanded practice now provided free counseling funded by community donations, watched several of her veteran patients in the audience. The healing that had begun in this room 6 months ago continued spreading throughout Millfield. Tyler Washington live-streamed the event, his social media networks carrying the message to thousands of followers who'd followed the story from viral video to community transformation. Supporting veterans isn't charity, Marcus concluded, his voice strong with conviction he'd rediscovered. It's continuing service to those who served. It's recognizing that we're all stronger when we take care of each other. As applause filled the room, Danny Thornton stepped forward, extending his hand to the man he'd once humiliated. The handshake that followed represented more than forgiveness. It embodied the possibility of redemption through sustained commitment to something larger than personal comfort. Honor, Marcus had learned, wasn't just about individual character. It was about building communities worthy of the sacrifice others had made to protect them. Outside, the Pacific Ocean rolled against Millfield's shores, carrying away the old tides and bringing in something new, something better, something worth preserving. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.